All right, patrons. Welcome to the program. I think this is an important discussion, but I don't know that I'm ready to have it out in public, so I figured to have it here amongst the family, amongst you guys, kind of flesh this out, let you hear kind of what I'm processing and how I'm processing things. So there's been a debate, mainly between Reinhold and I, within our Facebook group. So we have a chat that goes on between about 10 of us who are all involved in We Are Libertarians, and it's kind of like a writer's room where we, before we talk out in public or post things or we swap stories or whatever, we kind of work things through and discuss. Made up of a variety of different types of libertarians, all the people that you hear on the dailies and across the networks, the Brian Nichols and such. And Reinhold and I have been going back and forth on basically he went full Antifa the other day. And Dennis, I love Dennis, and he's one of the smartest people I know, and he's such a great partner to debate with because he really knows his stuff. He really understands historical knowledge, and he tends to lean more towards the left side of the culture, and I tend to lean more towards the right side of the culture, and so it's really great because he and I will go back and forth, and I don't know that I ever make him see anything. I'm not sure, but I know that he definitely makes me see some things. And so he posted a comment in the group the other day that he had called Trump a fascist. And I was like, oh, well, Dennis, we always joke that he's a communist, and we always joke that he's, sorry, I'm getting rid of the cat, a socialist. See, damn it, Mittens. I am grouchy today, and this cat is part of the reason why. I will put you down. Every time I sit behind the microphone or talk on the phone or whatever, she just gets up in my face and irritates me. And it's just very irritating. You try to do a podcast for your favorite patrons, and your stupid cat comes up and starts getting in your face and irritates you. Go away. I will sell you to the Chinese factory. I will take you to China King right now. Sorry. I'm not married, so I have to yell at somebody. So anyways, Dennis called him a fascist. And I called Dennis Antifa. And so he goes, yeah, but what doesn't fit? And he sent this article that was the 14 traits of fascism. And I read through it. Now, this is from spring 2003. And so obviously we're in the middle of, in spring of 2003, the Bush era and the lead up to Iraq. And everybody was calling George Bush a Nazi. And that's just, what. And here's my problem that I always kind of say back to Dennis. It's like, John McCain was a Nazi. John McCain was a fascist. Everybody's a fascist all the time. George Bush, you read anything about that era. The thing is that the media will never give a fair shake. It's just like you saw with David Koch's death. You see this guy who gave billions and billions and billions of dollars towards charity, and he's a fascist. It's good that he's dead. It's what did Austin Peterson tweet out? Let me see if I can find this, and I'll read it to you. And he's totally right. Getting there. Man, I have so many good memes. I steal so many good memes is what I should say. So Austin said, the passing of David Koch is a good reminder of Kurt Schlichter is right. No matter how much philanthropy you do or how much you buck the party system or even service many liberal causes, if you don't fully buy into their program, the left hates you and wants you to die. And it's true. Like, it doesn't matter what I do as a person who is sort of on the fence in terms of the left-right spectrum, a fairly moderate-thinking person. I'm suspect. I'm not well-liked. And many of you probably feel that way in your own life, where you're not part of the right or left culture or even the part of left or right political sphere. You may lean one way or the other, but the left This is why I just firmly don't believe that libertarians and the left can coexist. I'm using that broad, amorphous term, but the right is willing to at least sit down and have a conversation with libertarians, whereas the left is not. If you're David Koch and you're joining with George Soros to start an anti-war foundation, you're fighting for criminal justice reform through the Charles Koch Institute, it doesn't matter what you do to help serve their liberal causes. The fact that there was a chemical spill one time in '84 and you help fund Republican presidential candidates, you're a monster. You're literally evil. You're awful. So I just, I find the hyperbole, and this is the thing, I felt this way during the Obama years. The party that is in power, the side that is out of power, gets themselves so worked up to a point that it's just hyperbole and out of control and insane. They just start saying things that aren't true. So much of the left right now is just hyperbolic. And so when you call Trump a fascist, just as they did with George W. Bush and H.W. and Reagan and every other Republican president since the beginning of time, people just kind of tune you out. And what they do is they just say, well, you're not a rational thinking person. But there comes a time when you have to go, okay, Dennis is somebody who is not hyperbolic and does understand what he believes and is a libertarian. He's on our team. And so he sent this article about the 14 characteristics of fascism. And I want to read this to you, and then we'll take a look at a couple things that are going on and just his general attitude, Trump's general attitude. So the 14 characteristics of fascism are as follows. Number 1, powerful and continuing nationalism. Fascist regimes tend to make constant use of patriotic mottos, slogans, symbols, songs, and other paraphernalia. Flags are seen everywhere, as are flag symbols on clothing and in public displays. Now, you could really say, okay, well, that's a characteristic of all American politics and all American society. The flag is so pervasive through our society. Number 2, disdain for the recognition of human rights. Because of fear of enemies and the need for security, the people in fascist regimes are persuaded that human rights can be ignored in certain cases because of, quote, need. The people tend to look the other way or even approve of torture, summary executions, assassinations, long incarcerations of prisoners. This is something that I find to be fairly unique to the Trump movement of the right now. If you look at their reaction to the immigrant kids, I think that was a real warning sign for me last year and then again this June, where you have these Trump supporters who are just not moved in any way, shape, or form by an infant who's feeding out of a bottle that hasn't been washed in weeks, or children sleeping in their own feces because they're not allowed to use the restroom, or child separations where border crossing guards are going, pick your new mom. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of children right now just kind of lost in the United States, separated from their parents, released into the foster system or just released onto the streets while their parents were sent back to their home countries. What kind of society are we that we would do those things? That to me, it's just so obvious that every prisoner, the whole point. I've been reading Les Miserables, and I watched every movie version lately. I've been kind of obsessed with it. Heard the Hong Kong protesters sing Les Mis, and I was like, I've never really watched that, so I just gone off the deep end. And you see Valjean when he gets 5 years for stealing a loaf of bread during a famine to feed a child, and gets 5 years, and then ends up serving 19. And then gets branded with this yellow ticket, this yellow passport, dangerous man, and he really can't survive until he just escapes and changes his identity. That's a society that's broken, because the society that treats the point of really our government is to protect the smallest minority, the individuals, but also those who are considered less than in the society. And so when your attitude towards an immigrant child is fuck them, they can sleep in their own shit because they're brown and their parents dragged them here and they're not American. Like, no, the attitude that made America special was that those people, we go above and beyond helping those people because they're the least of us. They are, if you're a ward of the state, you're not to be tortured. You're to be given due process and a fair trial and treated fairly. So I just look at it and go, okay, we're going to deny human rights for children? Okay, that's a big, scary sign for me, for the Trump movement. Number 3, identification of enemies, scapegoats as a unifying cause. The people are rallied in a unifying patriotic frenzy over the need to eliminate a perceived common threat or foe, racial, ethnic, or religious minorities, liberals, communists, socialists, terrorists, etc. You definitely see this with labeling SJWs or the media or immigrants. He definitely does that, but let's make no mistake, the left does that as well in terms of conservatives or libertarians. The number 4, supremacy of the military. Even when there is widespread domestic problems, the military is given a disproportionate amount of government funding, and the domestic agenda is neglected. Soldiers and military service are glamorized. Certainly true of the right. The new American religion on the right is glorifying police and soldiers. There's no doubt about that. Number 5, rampant sexism. The governments of fascist nations tend to be almost exclusively male-dominated. Under fascist regimes, traditional gender roles are made more rigid. Opposition to abortion is high, as is homophobia and anti-gay legislation and national policy. This one doesn't fit. And I know that, well, Trump said grab her by the pussy. But the fact is Trump has a lot of females and a lot of, he's the first president to hold the LGBT flag. I know that people on the left want to try and push this idea that he hates gays, but he clearly doesn't. Like, here's a guy who's moved in major media and art circles for years in New York City since the 80s. He has very liberal attitudes towards the LGBT community. I think it's fair to say that he says sexist things or has sexist attitudes, but I think he's a product of his time. I mean, so much of Trump is that he just sort of started isolating himself in 1983 after hanging out with all these mob guys in clubs in the late 70s, early 80s. And he just has that attitude of like your dad's golfing buddy. And it's sexist, but it's not like... so much of Trump's like racism and sexism and all that stuff is just sort of like... it's just like your grandfather. You just sort of go, well, they don't mean to be that way. Intent, I guess, is maybe the word that I'm searching for. So I don't know that this one necessarily fits. 6, controlled mass media. Sometimes media is directly controlled by the government, but in other cases, the media is indirectly controlled by government regulation or sympathetic media spokespeople and executives. Censorship, especially in wartime, is very common. Yes, the conservative media exists, but the most popular conservative commentator right now on the right is Ben Shapiro, in my opinion, and he is extremely critical of the president on a regular basis. You obviously have the cheerleaders like Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson, but by and large, the media is obsessed with bringing Donald Trump down. So there's not wide-scale control of the media. If anything, you look at like the Russia collusion narrative, the propaganda is anti-Trump. So do I think that if he had the ability to control the media, he would? Hell yeah. Absolutely. One of his biggest supporters is a state legislator here that I get in frequent fights with, and he introduced a bill to license journalists here in the state. Now, it was a smart-ass way to say, well, if you're going to license my guns, then I'm going to license your free speech, which sort of a clever thing, but the thing that you sort of notice about the Trump movement is it starts with jokes. Hey, we're kidding. We're joking. And then it ends up like, no, we're serious. Number 7, obsession with national security. Fear is used as a motivational tool by the government over the masses. Well, obviously, Trump is trying to make the case that he gets to treat China whatever way he wants because of fear over China. But let's be honest, this is what both sides do. This is the entire government is fascist in this regard. Religion and government are intertwined. Governments and fascist nations tend to use the most common religion in the nation as a tool to manipulate public opinion. Religious rhetoric and terminology is common from government leaders, even when the major tenets of the religion are diametrically opposed to the government's policies or actions. Now, maybe that had been true for Bush. 20 years ago, we were a much more Christian nation than we are now. But I would say that the dominant religion in America now is a secular leftist spirituality or atheism. It's certainly not Christianity. I think more people identify as Christians as their kind of home base, but in terms of people who are practicing Christianity and who are believing Christians, it's a very low number compared to the people that you'd say, well, we're a Christian nation. It's like, are we really? Because it doesn't feel that way. And Trump is certainly not. I mean, for God's sake, his favorite book of the Bible is 2 Corinthians, or Corinthians 2, the sequel. I mean, the guy clearly has never read the Bible, and he just sucks up to the religious aspects, because that's what Republicans just have kind of gone after, right? I've talked about The Family on Netflix, good, worth a watch. So I don't necessarily find this one to be a very persuasive point. Corporate power is protected. The industrial and business aristocracy of a fascist nation are often the ones who put the government leaders into power, creating a mutually beneficial business-government relationship and power elite. Yeah, both sides on this one. Trump really doesn't get a lot of business leaders. If anything, he's got more of them against him. But the structure, by and large, yeah, that fits. Labor power is suppressed because the organizing power of labor is the only real threat to a fascist government. Labor unions are either eliminated entirely or are severely suppressed. Now, this one doesn't fit with Trump. He has actually shifted. Unions have long been on the left side of the aisle, and with Trump, with his protectionism, and then the Democrats trying to strip health insurance, he's sort of tilting the labor unions towards his side. So he's curried favors with the unions more than anything. So this one does not fit. Number 11 does, though. Disdain for intellectuals and the arts. Fascist nations tend to promote and tolerate open hostility to higher education and academia. It is not uncommon for professors and other academics to be censored or even arrested. Free expression in the arts is openly attacked, and governments often refuse to fund the arts. Obsession with crime and punishment. So, yeah, definitely disdain for academics and intellectuals. For good reasons, to be honest. So that one definitely fits. Number 12, obsession with crime and punishment. Under fascist regimes, the police are given almost limitless power to enforce laws. The people are often willing to overlook police abuses and even forego civil liberties in the name of patriotism. There's often a national police force with virtually unlimited power in fascist nations. Well, yeah. I mean, the right especially. The Back the Blue movement and all that. I mean, the reality is that police at this point face very few consequences for their behavior and can pretty much do whatever they want to and they'll get off. And a large segment of our population is just going to agree with it and go along with it and be okay with it, especially on the right. And Trump has certainly played into that. Number 13, rampant cronyism and corruption. Fascist regimes are almost always governed by groups of friends or associates who appoint each other to government positions and use governmental power and authority to protect their friends from accountability. It is not uncommon in fascist regimes for national resources and even treasures to be appropriated or even outright stolen by government leaders. Again, left and right, like, it's hard to say that Trump has done this because Trump, at the end of the day, is fairly ineffective. There's no doubt that he would if he could get away with it, though. 14, fraudulent elections. Sometimes elections in a fascist nation are a complete sham. Other times they're are manipulated by smear campaigns against or even assassination of opposition candidates, use of legislation to control voting numbers or political district boundaries, and manipulation of the media. Fascist nations also typically use their judiciaries to manipulate, control elections. Now, that one does not apply. I know that the Stacey Abrams of the world are out there saying that she had her election stolen, and which is just a conspiracy theory. It's not true. The left and the right love to come up with all these conspiracies about how your vote how it's all rigged and how the other side is stealing your vote, and it's like, it's really not true. One of the few things that the government does well is the elections, and that's because it's controlled by your county. It's the greatest argument for local control that libertarians can make. So the idea that these are fraudulent elections is just bullshit. So now, based on this, does Trump seem like a fascist? No, it doesn't fit all the way. But there's a grain of truth in it. I mean, the guy definitely... this week, you sort of open up your newspaper and you go, oh, Wayne Allen Root, who I know fairly well from when he was in the Libertarian Party, who's just a huckster. But he was always a Trump guy. Trump just didn't exist. He was always a right-wing populist, and that's why he drove the left part of the libertarian movement wild, because he always kind of had that Trumpian... I mean, when Trump came along, it was just like, no wonder Wayne Allen Root dropped his pants and started beating off. Like this was who he was born to worship, basically. But I'm wildly uncomfortable as a Christian Wayne Allen Root is a professing Christian, former Jew. For him to call Trump the king of the Jews, he didn't call him that. It was like saying they think he's the king of the Jews. They think he's the chosen one in Israel. That language is sacred, and you're dabbling in the profane. And if you're a professing Christian, to use that kind of language about an elected political official is borderline profane. I mean, there are some things that are sacred in the Christian world, and the name of God and the position of Jesus, that's pretty high up there. And so for Trump to not only just not dismiss that, but also just to promote the idea that he's the chosen one, that he's the king of the Jews, I mean, that's a little freaky. Like that shows you a God complex is developing. And then you get to the tweet where he is going to order American companies, he says, I hereby order American companies not to do X, not to deal with China. Well, you don't get to do that. Like that's not how that works. Like, you don't get to just order companies. And then they're coming up with this bullshit national emergency thing from 1977 or whatever. This is not a national emergency. The tariff war that Trump created, that Trump has inflicted on the country, is not a national emergency. It's like that bike meme where you stuck your own stick in the spokes. And not everybody agrees. Like, a national emergency is 9/11 or Pearl Harbor, where everybody goes, yeah, this is a national crisis. Like, where everyone in Congress is on the steps with their hand over their heart singing, God bless America. That's when you know you have a national emergency. But you see people on Facebook and Twitter, the Trumpies, who are just like free marketeers for the last 20 years. Now, all of a sudden, they're like, yes, I believe that Donald Trump should be able to control the economy from the top down based on his own wishes, regardless of what the legislative branch thinks. Like, what? When did that become a thing? And then you get to the newest thing today, where from the Daily Caller, which is obviously friendly to Trump administration is considering using Amazon Echo and Apple Watch to determine if citizens should own a gun. The Trump administration is considering the proposal that would use Google, Amazon, and Apple to collect data on users who exhibit characteristics of mental illness that could lead to violent behavior, the Washington Post reported Thursday. The proposal is part of an initiative to create a Health Advanced Research Projects Agency, HARPA, which would be located inside the Health and Human Services Department, citing sources inside the administration. The new administration would have a separate budget, and the president would be responsible for appointing its director. HARPA would take after the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, which serves as research for the Pentagon. The idea was first crafted in 2017, but has since gotten a renewed push after the mass shootings. So the Suzanne Wright Foundation approached the president recently and proposed the agency include a project called Stopping Aberrant Fatal Events by Helping Overcome Mental Extremes, or Safe Home, citing two people familiar with the matter. President Donald Trump has a close relationship with Bob Wright, who founded the foundation after his wife died of cancer. Wright was the former chair of NBC and occupied that position during The Apprentice run. HARPA would develop breakthrough technologies with high specificity and sensitivity for early diagnosis of neuropsychiatric violence. So he's basically wanting to create a spy apparatus. I mean, it's not like we don't already know this exists. But here's the reality. Like the Alexa and your phone and all these things are listening to you all the time, and it is being collected by the government through the NSA. But it's not used for civilian purposes. He's arguing that your Alexa should be allowed to, like the government can just spy on you at any time, so they can take your guns. What is even remotely conservative about that? Like, so you've got a guy this week who is president of the United States, claiming he's the chosen one, saying that he has the authority to demand businesses do what he wants based on his wishes, regardless of the legislative branch or the Constitution. And now he wants to build a spying apparatus so he can confiscate your guns. Like, I'm on the 14 points. I'm not going to call him a fascist, but that's pretty damn fascist behavior. So the real danger with Trump is not in Trump himself. It's the movement that comes out of Trump. So what happens after Trump? And he has created what libertarians have kind of been having this battle. We talked about the Against Libertarian Brutalism article that Jeffrey Tucker wrote years ago. And libertarians have been battling the humanitarian versus brutalist mentality for a long time of, we should respect human rights and fuck other people. I can do what I want and be as violent as I want as long as I don't hurt anybody else. I can be racist, sexist, homophobic, whatever I want, but as long as I'm not hurting anybody. Just sort of that, that guy. That libertarian in your world. And that's now come to the Republican Party, that top-down ideology that really was perfected by Karl Rove in the 2000s. That's all gone, and now you've got a very fascistic movement that will come out of the Trump administration and is going to plague the GOP, and much like it has rendered the Libertarian Party largely ineffective because your more violent, crazy aspects tend to float up to the top, and that becomes, because as people denounce those people, it makes it look like, oh, that's the Libertarian Party, is the Ben Letters of the world. That's going to start happening on the right, and the media will jump on it, the media will seize on it, and it's really going to be a huge problem for people who are conservatives in the Republican Party. The introduction of brutalism and these fascistic tendencies are going to continue to develop. And so it's not that Trump is a fascist, but what can come out of the Trump movement certainly could be based on those 14 points when you really start to dig down and look at it. So I'm not faulting Dennis for calling Trump a fascist, because I think his warning is prescient. I think that there is something about this. There is something that we need to watch and we need to be cognizant of. But it's the idea that we're going to confiscate your guns because you your Alexa heard you yelling at your wife during a fight. Well, you two fought 3 times last week. So clearly you're not stable. You know what? Like it's just a really crazy fucking suggestion. Like I think we should be very concerned because as libertarians who care about natural rights, who care about limiting the size and scope of government, we know that the Republicans are driving a car and the Democrats are driving an F-16 towards socialism. But you now are going to have 2 parties that are driving planes as opposed to one pretending to care about limiting the size and scope of government. That game's up. And so our small minority of people are all that's left in terms of defending liberty. So it could be scary times ahead if this blossoms, but we've just got to get out there and start fighting for what we believe and trying to persuade people. So I'd be interested to hear what you have to say. Please hit me up, editor@wearelibertarians.com, to hear your point of view on this episode before I really kind of take it outside of the family here. So, yeah, please hit me up. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.